Imagine walking 20 miles a day, every day, with nearly 50 kilos strapped to your back. No sleep until you build a fortress from scratch. No mercy, no excuses. You grab your pack, and there's no relief, because it weighs nearly half your body. Armor. Weapons. Rations. Tools. Wooden stakes to build a camp you haven't even reached yet. All of it strapped to your back, waiting to crush your shoulders before the sun has even risen. This was life in Rome's legions, men forged into machines of war through the most brutal marches in history. Now imagine doing this not once, not twice, but every single day. 20 miles. Sometimes 30. In rain. In dust. In scorching heat or freezing winds. And when the march ends, there's no bed waiting. No tavern, no shelter. Instead, you and your comrades pick up shovels and axes, and you build a fortress from scratch. A ditch, a wall, a palisade. Only when it is finished, only when the perimeter is secure, are you allowed to rest. This was not a punishment. This was not cruelty for cruelty's sake. This was Rome. This was the legionary march. And for centuries, it was the beating heart of the greatest military machine the world had ever seen. Most armies in the ancient world struggled just to keep moving. Soldiers relied on wagons, animals, or slaves to haul their burdens. Stray too far from supply lines, and entire forces withered in exhaustion. But Rome was different. The Romans built a system where every man carried his own survival. Grain, cooking tools, armor, weapons, spare clothing, even the wooden stakes for nightly defenses, all of it was hauled on their backs. The burden was crushing, but it made them faster, harder, more reliable than any rival. It also made them something else. Something their enemies could hardly understand. Men who could appear at your gates after days of endless marching, and still have the strength to dig trenches and prepare for battle the very next morning. 20 miles a day was routine. 30 in emergencies. Historical sources tell us of legionaries covering distances that would cripple modern infantry. And yet, they did not break. Or if they did, Rome left them behind. The legion could not afford weakness. But here's the question, how? How did men survive this grind, day after day, year after year? What kept them alive under the weight of their packs, under the strain of their discipline, under the torment of roads that never seemed to end? To understand the secret, we must strip away the glory, the statues, the polished tales of victory. We must look at the legion not in the heat of battle, but in the slow, merciless rhythm of the march. Because Rome was not built on single moments of triumph, it was built on endurance. It was built on men who learned to survive the road itself. This is the untold reality of Rome's legion. In Rome's earliest days, its armies were not made of professionals. They were made of farmers. Citizens who left their fields to fight when duty called, and returned home when the campaign was over. These men marched lightly. Their shields, spears, and rations carried in simple bundles. Wagons followed behind with supplies. Armies in this age moved slowly, tied to their baggage, tied to their harvests, tied to the limits of men who were soldiers only for a season. But as Rome grew, so too did its enemies. Wars stretched further, campaigns lasted longer, and the old ways began to crack. The Republic faced a choice: adapt, or be broken by the weight of its own limitations. In 107 BCE, one man changed everything. His name was Gaius Marius. A general, a reformer, and the architect of the legion as we know it. Marius saw that citizen armies were no longer enough. Rome needed professionals. Men who would not serve for a season, but for years. Soldiers who lived, marched, and fought as a career, bound to Rome with their very survival. So he tore apart tradition. No longer would Rome rely on baggage trains or servants to carry supplies. Every man would carry his own world on his back. Armor. Weapons. Cooking gear. grain for days, and wooden stakes for building nightly camps. The weight was punishing. Some accounts estimate as much as 40 to 50 kilos, nearly half the weight of the man himself. But this was no mistake. It was design. For by making each soldier his own beast of burden, Marius gave Rome something far more valuable than comfort: independence. The legion no longer crawled with supply wagons. It moved like a machine, swift, efficient, unbroken by the loss of horses or carts. And it instilled in the men a discipline so deep it became instinct. They were no longer part-time farmers with spears. They were weapons. The soldiers hated it. They cursed the weight, they cursed the endless marches, and they cursed the man who forced it upon them. Soon, they had a name for themselves: Marius mules. But names have power. What began as an insult became a mark of pride. These men were tougher than their enemies. They could outlast, outmarch, and outfight any force that dared face them. Marius had reshaped the legion, not just its weapons, not just its formations, but its very soul. He had turned endurance into a weapon. And in doing so, he had built the foundation of an empire. But this reform came with a price. Every mile carried, every blister bled, every camp dug from the hard earth, all of it demanded sacrifice. It created a new reality, one that would break most men, but forged the Roman legionary into something more than human. The march was no longer just movement. It was survival. It was identity. And it was Rome's greatest weapon. History is not built on victories alone. It is built on the choices that broke men, and the ones that remade them. The story of Marius' mules is not just about soldiers. It is about endurance, sacrifice, and the cost of becoming unstoppable. If you want to uncover more tales like this, the raw, untold truths that shaped our world, then join me here, on Tale of History. Because history is not a story of comfort. It is a story of survival. Day after day, the legion moved like clockwork. 20 kilometers was standard. 30 was common. And in moments of desperation, when speed meant survival, men were pushed to march as far as 40, even 50 kilometers in a single day. That's more than a modern marathon, with a crushing weight pressing into your shoulders every single step. The weight itself was its own enemy. 40 to 50 kilograms strapped to the body, armor and shield, sword and javelins, tools for digging, stakes for building camp, rations of grain, water, and dried meat. Imagine carrying half your body weight, and then walking for 10 hours straight, under the sun, under the rain, under the eyes of centurions who demanded that not a single man fall behind. For the Roman soldier, this was not extraordinary. This was routine. Every march began at dawn. The legionary rose from the cold earth, his back stiff from the night before. He ate a quick ration, bread if he was lucky, porridge more often, sometimes a piece of dried meat. There was no comfort, only fuel for the road. The camp was dismantled with speed and precision. Tents collapsed, tools gathered, packs strapped tight. Within minutes, the army transformed from a fortress into a column ready to move. And then the march began. Hour after hour, the road stretched ahead. Sometimes paved Roman roads that cut across mountains and valleys. Sometimes little more than dirt tracks carved into hostile lands. No matter the terrain, the pace never faltered. Formations were strict, sentries lined up in order, officers pacing along the sides, eyes sharp for any sign of weakness. For the men, the rhythm became a prison. Step after step, the weight dragging them down, their muscles screaming. But still they marched. Because to stumble meant shame. To fall behind meant punishment. And to collapse could mean being left behind altogether. When the day's march finally ended, rest did not come. The legionaries' work was only halfway finished. At every halt, no matter how brief, a camp was built. A ditch was dug. Earth was piled high. Wooden stakes were planted to form a defensive wall. This was not luxury. This was survival. The enemy could strike at any moment, and the legion was never unprepared. Only after the last palisade was raised, only after the standards were planted in the heart of camp, could a soldier finally eat, drink, and collapse onto the ground. Tomorrow, it would all begin again. Yet somehow, they endured. Not through strength alone, but through countless small acts of survival. Men rotated positions in the line to ease the burden. Comrades shared loads when one faltered. Rations of grain were simple, but they were steady, providing endurance even when flavor was forgotten. And then there was morale, the hidden weapon of the march. Legionaries sang, chanted, even joked through gritted teeth to keep the rhythm, to keep despair from swallowing them whole. A march was not only a test of the body, but of the mind. And Rome knew it. The daily march was not glorious. It was not the clash of swords or the roar of victory. It was endless, merciless routine. But it was in this grind that the legion was forged. Every step, every blister, every camp dug into hostile soil, it hardened the soldier into something his enemies could never match. A man who could endure the impossible, and then fight as though the march had not even begun. This was the true reality of the legionary's life. Not triumph. Not glory. But survival. The Roman legionary was not born. He was made. Forged in the heat of training long before he ever set foot on a battlefield. To survive the march, a soldier had to first survive the drill yard. And Rome's training was as merciless as the road itself. Recruits were broken down, stripped of comfort, and rebuilt into machines of endurance. One of the first lessons was the march. Not a casual walk, but a brutal test of stamina. Soldiers were forced to carry weighted packs, sometimes heavier than the gear they would use in war. 20 miles, 30 miles, sometimes more, not in weeks, but in a single day. The lesson was simple: if you could not endure the training ground, you would never endure the campaign. Falling behind was not tolerated. If a man stumbled, the punishment was swift and merciless. Whips, beatings, extra duties, even the shame of being singled out before his comrades. Survival often meant pushing far beyond human limits, because the alternative was humiliation, or worse. Vegetius, the Roman military writer, put it plainly: a soldier should dread his officers more than the enemy. Discipline was not cruelty. It was survival. Rome's enemies would show no mercy. If a legion broke on the road, it would be destroyed in the field. And so the officers became harsher than the foe. Better to bleed in training than to die in battle. Marching was only one part of this crucible. Soldiers drilled with weapons twice as heavy as their real ones, conditioning their muscles to swing without fatigue. They ran, swam, built fortifications, and dug trenches until their bodies ached and their minds burned. Every action was repeated until it became instinct. Formations drilled endlessly, turning, advancing, retreating with mechanical precision. Cohesion was everything. The man beside you was your lifeline, and breaking rank was as dangerous as enemy steel. Through discipline, the legion was not a collection of men. It was a single body. One heartbeat. One rhythm. One will. Rome's enemies often believed that victory could come from endurance, that the march itself would break the invaders from the west. But again and again, the legions arrived, not weakened, not fractured, but hardened. The reason was not luck. It was not chance. It was discipline, drilled into every soldier from his first day to his last. Discipline that turned exhaustion into routine. Discipline that made the impossible, ordinary. And this discipline was not a burden Rome placed on its soldiers. It was the shield that made survival possible. Without it, the legion would have collapsed under its own weight. With it, it became unstoppable. The march was the crucible of the legion. But it was a crucible that left scars. Survival was never free. Every mile, every step, carried a cost that no soldier could escape. The physical toll was merciless. Feet blistered and bled, leather sandals grinding skin raw. Shoulders bruised deep purple beneath the crushing straps of a 50-kilo pack. Exhaustion gnawed at every muscle, stealing strength day by day. Malnutrition followed, rations of grain kept men alive, but never satisfied. Injuries, untreated or ignored, festered in the heat and filth of the road. Many soldiers did not fall in battle. They fell in silence, broken by the march itself. And yet, the cost was not only in the body. It was in the mind. Monotony crushed the spirit, the same road, the same routine, repeated endlessly. Dawn. March. Dig. Sleep. Repeat. Fear followed close behind, the knowledge that an ambush could fall at any moment, that the enemy was always watching. Soldiers lived in a state of constant readiness, their nerves stretched thin, their minds hardened by the knowledge that weakness was death. Some broke under the strain. Some deserted. Some chose silence and obedience, carrying their burden until they could no longer stand. But most endured, not because they wanted to, but because Rome demanded it. And that endurance was Rome's greatest weapon. While other armies collapsed from exhaustion, Rome's legions pressed forward. While enemies waited for them to falter, they arrived stronger than ever. Towns and cities that believed themselves safe awoke to the sight of standards rising on their walls, legions striking with full force after days of punishing marches. It was this system, brutal, unforgiving, and relentless, that allowed Rome to fight wars across continents, to appear where no army should have been able to appear, and to conquer a world that stretched from the sands of Africa to the forests of Britain. What broke lesser men became the very reason Rome conquered the world. The march was never about glory. It was about survival. A survival bought with blood, sweat, and the endless grind of the road. And that is the hidden truth of history: empires are not built only by heroes and victories. They are built by ordinary men who suffered, endured, and carried the weight of worlds on their backs. The Roman legionaries' march is only one of countless stories buried beneath the polished stone of history. Stories of struggle, sacrifice, and survival, stories that shaped the world we live in today. If you want to walk further down these roads, to uncover more of the untold, the brutal, and the forgotten, then join me here, on Tale of History. Because history is not just a tale of triumphs. It is a tale of the cost behind them. And only by remembering that cost, do we truly understand the past. The legionaries' march was more than movement. It was the heartbeat of an empire. Each step, each blister, each night spent digging into hard earth was another pulse in Rome's veins. Survival on the road was survival of Rome itself. Without it, the legions would have faltered, their enemies would have triumphed, and the empire we know today might never have been born. The clash of swords may capture the imagination, but Rome was not built on battles alone. It was built on endurance. On the relentless grind of men who carried their lives, their weapons, and their empire on their backs. Men who walked until their feet bled, dug until their hands split, and fought as if the march had never happened at all. The road was cruel. The burden was merciless. Yet it was here, in the dust and sweat of endless marches, that Rome carved its destiny. This is the untold truth of history: greatness does not come from moments of glory alone. It comes from the suffering no one speaks about, the hidden struggles behind the victories written in stone. The Roman legionary was not a hero in marble. He was a man. Tired. Hungry. Broken. Yet still he marched. Still he endured. And because he did, the empire endured too. What broke lesser men became the very reason Rome conquered the world. And this is only one story. History is filled with tales like this. Tales not of glory, but of survival. Tales of blood, sweat, and sacrifice that shaped the rise and fall of civilizations. If you want to uncover more disturbing, untold truths of the past, subscribe to Tale of History. Because the past was never gentle. It was brutal. It was merciless. And it's time to uncover it.